Hello world. Good morning, namaste and Nisam Bulavinaka from Sydney, Australia. I am Sashi Singh and welcome to Sashi Singh's Talking Point. Welcome to my corner of the world on this Sunday morning in Sydney, Australia. Today, the 16th day of October 2022. Whichever corner of the world you are watching SSTP from, welcome to the highly anticipated weekly presentation of Sashi Singh's Talking Point. Today, SSTP celebrates episode 40. Yes, indeed, today we are on the 40th episode. The party will be on hold until we reach episode 50. That will be a reason to celebrate, as there are some who never thought that we would get this far. Yes, the doomsayers predicted our demise, but we have quietly and confidently persevered in presenting the weekly diet of SSTP. It is only, of course, possible because of the chief guests who have volunteered their time and who have had the belief and confidence in SSTP to appear as our guests. To all my previous 39 guests, I say to you, thank you very, very much indeed. In episode 40 this week, we will shortly meet our chief guest, Ms. Monica Raghwan, former Member of Parliament in Fiji, business and property manager, and the provisional candidate for the Fiji Labour Party in the forthcoming general elections. We will discuss with our chief guest what the areas of significant concern are to the people of Fiji, discuss the growing emphasis on food sustainability, water supply, and seed security around the world in these times of changing climatic conditions, and whether Fiji is prepared for this. We will also find out her take on Labour putting people first, her sense of the electorate and aspirations as Fiji heads to the general elections. All that, plus a whole lot more, to discuss with our chief guest, Ms. Monica Raghwan, in just a short while from now. I hope wherever you are well settled in to enjoy what promises to be a captivating, engaging, and enlightening interview with my chief guest. As always, I request that today, as we go right around the world, by the powers of Facebook and YouTube, that you please share the SSTP page on your own timelines if you can, so that we can share the interview with Ms. Raghwan with as many interested people as possible. And to ensure that you receive instant notifications for all future programs, please like and follow the SSTP page as well. Welcome to the Thinking People's program, Sashi Singh's Talking Point, live on Facebook and YouTube. Now it's time to unpack the main features of the news from Fiji and Australia. Unfortunately, Nikhil Singh is not available today as he is attending a conference in Sydney, so it's straight to the news from Fiji. Radio New Zealand has reported that Fiji MP and leader of the opposition National Federation Party, Professor Biman Prasad, is accusing Prime Minister Frank Bainimarama's ruling Fiji First Party of suppressing opposition parties with newly amended electoral laws ahead of the country's general elections this year. These are draconian pieces of electoral laws which are designed to keep the opposition parties at bay, Professor Prasad said. They are designed to persecute and gag the opposition parties and prevent them from campaigning. These are absurd and stupid laws governing the electoral process, he added. The Electoral Amendment Bill 2022 gives the country's Supervisor of Elections, Mohammed Saneem, the right to direct a person by notice in writing to furnish any relevant information or document, notwithstanding the provisions of any other written law on confidentiality, privilege, or secrecy. It means candidates have no rights of confidentiality if ordered to hand over a document, and punishments for not complying range from fines up to $50,000 to a prison term of over 5 years. Mohammed Saneem has been accused in the past of being pro-government. Professor Prasad alleges only the Fiji First Party has the freedom to campaign as they want, when they want, where they want, and how they want. He said the opposition have to look behind our backs constantly to make sure we don't fall behind the wrong side of the law. You would never experience such absurd and ridiculous levels of conflict of interest, Professor Prasad said. The head of the Catholic Church in Fiji, Archbishop Peter Loy Chong, says Fijians today live in uncertain times, live in fear, and it is dangerous to speak your mind for truth and justice. In his article on colonialism, independence, freedom, the Archbishop said he has also been threatened for speaking out. The head of the Catholic Church in Fiji says the Bainimarama-led 2006 coup was labeled as the coup to end all coups, but we live in uncertain times. Archbishop Chong says this year Fiji celebrates 52 years of independence, but are we truly democratic and free, and are we fear-free? Labour leader Mahendra Chaudhry has commended Archbishop Peter Loy Chong for his outspoken and courageous Fiji Day message in pointing out that Fijians today live in fear. Opposition parties have urged the authorities concerned, including the Supervisor of Elections, to treat the ruling Fiji First Party as they have treated their opponents. To this effect, the Fiji Independent Commission Against Corruption, FICAC, has been asked to investigate and take action against Fiji First Party General Secretary Ayaz Sayed Qayyum. In a letter to FICAC, National Federation Party General Secretary Seni Numbo said the investigation should be focused on the alleged breaches of the Electoral Act 2014, which occurred between October 8th and October 11, 2022, when a large Fiji First Party banner was placed on the Suva City Council car park building in Central Street, Suva. She said it was unthinkable that Mr. Sayed Qayyum, a lawyer and one of the authors of the Electoral Act, did not know the party had allegedly breached the legislation. Also speaking out on the same issue, Fiji Labour Party leader Mahendra Chaudhry, who in a letter to the Supervisor of Elections Mohammed Saneem on Thursday urged him not to show double standards in dealing with the alleged breach by the Fiji First Party and to refer the party to FICAC. And the People's Alliance Party leader and former Prime Minister Sitiveni Rabuka has questioned what is fair about the Fiji First government being free to give away benefits worth millions of dollars, while the opposition parties are required to follow rules that make it difficult to give relatively small amounts of special help to some members of the public. Mr. Rabuka also questioned the basis on which the opposition parties were constantly at risk of violating the law when they assisted the vulnerable in society. He accused the Attorney General of being ridiculous as he continued to press on issues such as roti parcels in an attempt to stave off elections defeat. Mr. Rabuka has also questioned the powers granted to the Supervisor of Elections, saying recently that the Supervisor of Elections had acquired powers far beyond his previous job description. His job description has changed. He has arguably become one of the most powerful officials in Fiji, Mr. Rabuka said. And as an aside, I just wonder who is in charge in Fiji at this very point in time, as it has been stated to me a short while ago that both the Prime Minister and the Attorney General of Fiji are in Sydney, at the Stamford Hotel, I'm told. So the question is, who is the acting Prime Minister in Fiji at this point in time? We'll find out shortly, I guess. Well, closer to home, our regular contributor, Nikhil Singh, had earlier reported on further industrial action by New South Wales rail workers and how the action could be something the commuters will not complain about. Well, the Sydney Morning Herald has reported that Opal card readers at Sydney train stations are set to be shut down as early as next week after rail workers voted overwhelmingly in favour of the action as part of their prolonged industrial dispute with the state government. The rail, tram and bus union has yet to decide when it will inform the government of plans by its members to deactivate Opal readers. It is required to give 3 days' notice of the planned industrial action, which will make the entire Sydney rail network free for commuters. And the Anthony Albanese Labour government has put words into action following the robo-debt bungle by the previous Liberal governments. Nine News has reported that almost 200,000 Australians will have their robo-debt reviews wiped as the federal government drops cases sparked by the bungled debt recovery program. The relief covers 197,000 Australians subject to robo-debt review that was not yet finalised, having been put on hold in 2019 when the then coalition government stopped using the controversial practice to pursue new debts. Loved ones of several people who took their own lives after receiving debt notices directly blamed robo-debt for the suicide. That is a brief look at the news from Fiji and Australia. You are watching Sashi Singh's Talking Point on Facebook Live. We ask the questions that Fijians all over the world want answers to. As I say, Fijians want to know. Please like and follow the SSTP page if you have not done so. I have an important announcement to share with our viewers. Sashi Singh's Talking Point, SSTP, recognizes that questioning, constructive arguments, and opinions are part of conversation, but posts with aggressive personal attacks, profanity, name-calling, swearing, defamatory in nature, and/or threatening will be removed immediately, and offenders will be blocked from being a part of the SSTP program. Let's observe these rules and enjoy the program. As I say and maintain, you can make a point and argue your point without using vulgarity. So please do not use profanity, and you can argue your points across on SSTP. That I will accommodate, but no swearing, no name calling, and no insults will be tolerated against any of my chief guests or against anybody who contributes to this program. So there you go. Simple rules to follow. Follow these rules, enjoy the program. Now it is time to meet our chief guest on Sashi Singh's Talking Point. My chief guest today is Miss Monica Nalini Raghwan, who was elected from the Samumbula Tamavua Open constituency into the House of Representatives in the 2006 elections, defeating Songosongondo Watini Lewinivanwa's star recruit Tupeni Mbamba. The win also made her one of the youngest members of the House of Representatives at that time. Monica Raghwan completed her Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Madras in India, majoring in botany. She completed a postgraduate diploma in biology, plant breeding from the University of the South Pacific. She has also undertaken professional courses in landscaping and horticulture and fish and prawn farming. She has been a past president of the Fiji Junior Chambers International, better known as Fiji JCs, has been a delegate to the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association conferences in Nigeria, Wellington, and Samoa during her term in Parliament. Politically affiliated to the Fiji Labour Party, where she is the current serving vice president. On a day-to-day basis, our chief guest is the administrative and property manager in the family business Raghwan Construction. With that introduction, it is my pleasure to introduce Ms. Monica Raghwan. Monica, good morning to you. Good morning from Sydney, and good afternoon to you in Fiji. How are you this afternoon?
Good afternoon. I'm well, thank you. And hello from here in Fiji to you and to the audience.
Wonderful to have you, Monica. Thank you very much for agreeing to be my chief guest on this Sunday. Let me start episode 40 of Sashi Singh's Talking Point by asking you first up about your childhood. Where were you born?
I was born here in Suva.
All right, so you're a Suva person. Congratulations. Suva won the IDC last week as well, after 8 years. Well done. Now, how would you describe your early childhood, Monica?
A happy one, full of, I have surrounded by family, surrounded by parents, grandparents. So a happy one, definitely a happy one.
And what about your early schooling? Which school did you attend, primary and secondary?
I went to Verita Primary for the 6 years, classes 1 to 6. And we actually go automatically to Silver Grammar School, which was from from Forms 1 to Form 7.
All right. And in my introduction, I mentioned that you completed a Bachelor of Science degree majoring in botany. Firstly, what was the experience of studying in Madras, India?
It was a very exciting one. It was, how shall I say? I've had some of my best moments, best time in India. The people, the food, the style, the college itself, and I must say, even today, and maybe some of them are watching, I still have my friends that I met 30 years ago.
And what was it that made you pursue a degree in botany?
That was by chance. When I was called in for an interview, she asked me what I wanted to do, and I hadn't made up my mind at that time. So when she looked at my CV, she looked at my results, and she said, "Well, you've done well. You've done very well in biology, and you've done well in English." And just looked at me. She said, "How about botany?" And I
Mhm.
was like, I turned to the lady who had come with me, and I said, "What is botany?" And she goes, "Study of plants." I said, "No, that sounds fine, just fine." So botany it was.
All right. And no regrets ever since?
No, none at all. Yeah.
Wonderful. Now, Monica, who would you say was the earliest influence in your life?
I've had quite a few people who influenced my life, and I think I'd attribute it mostly to my parents, and also to the Sunday school I attended. Um, it brings out the discipline, and it brings out a lot of things in you, and that gave me focus, a lot of focus.
All right. And in terms of memories, what would you say is your earliest memory?
The earliest memory I can remember is being in a classroom on a Sunday and Sunday school again, and reciting a memory verse, and getting really excited about getting a one of those sticker stars to say that you have done well and you've remembered your memory verse. That's the earliest one. I was trying to remember, and the other one I was trying to figure out whether that was early, was when I think I dropped my sister down 2 steps, but I think that happened later. So it was the Sunday school incident. Yes.
Well, yes, I remember those stickers. They make a young child just glow
Yeah,
with
that was it.
pride.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Mm, Trying to find out a bit more about you. What are the values in life that are important to you?
um Trust in God is one.
Mhm.
I like honesty and integrity. Discipline, I value time. Respect for one another. And I think what is important, and which people might not recognize it as value, is enjoy life. It's a gift from God.
Well said indeed. Let me look at your political journey and explore that for a bit. What was the event or scenario that got you interested in politics in the first place?
Mm. I think, as you mentioned some of the things that I did growing up, whether it was my training in leadership, the various organizations that I had, whether it was the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme, or the JCs, or CFO, or the church groups, or the executive groups that we were part of, informing decisions. And I think a time comes in your life when there's another step. And when we were approached, I gave it a bit of thought at that time and realized that if we're going to be going into we have a future. If somebody's going to be making a decision, then why not be part of it? And so, of course, when we got approached, I applied. And after primary, we had a primary, I got selected, and I stood for the elections. That's how it happened.
Well, you contested the 2006 general elections for the Fiji Labour Party. Why the Fiji Labour Party?
Oh, I keep saying why not to many people. Um, um, Fiji Labour Party was formed for the ordinary people. To me, it meant a movement in the direction of equality and social justice. And when I'm talking about ordinary people, I'm talking about all of us. We're all ordinary people, and what we end up doing is it's up to us whether it's going to be extraordinary or still ordinary, but be part of everything. And I like that feel of being part of something bigger.
Okay. Now, in 2006, as I said in my introduction, you contested the election against Dr. Tupeni Mbamba. Firstly, what did it feel like going against a veteran academic and a veteran politician?
Well, it wasn't just him. There were other stalwarts as in that particular constituency. We had the late Philip Mbole. We had the former Speaker of the House, Honorable Peter Naduva. And of course, we had Tupeni Mbamba, who was a former Labour, as well as Deputy Prime Minister. And we also had Pramod Durai, a trade unionist with NFP. So I think for me at that point in time, I only had 20 days to go and get myself prepared for that election. So for me, I was like, you go in, you do your work, and we'll see what happens. So to me, I did not see anybody with all I knew that they had been there before, and I had to just work. So you can't have room for doubts at that point in time. But yes, it can be quite intimidating.
And a lot of hard work.
Yeah, 20 days was a lot of hard work. And my team, the campaigning team, my dad, who was one of my main campaign manager, they put in a lot of work in those 20 days. But I must say, during those days, it was a lot more fun in the campaign. Right now, we got so many restrictions, and you're wondering, we've lost the fun. Before you could walk down, everybody's wearing their T-shirts and everybody's, talking. And it was just an easy way of having an election. But now I think it's quite different.
We'll discuss the differences a little later on in this interview with all the electoral laws that have come about. I certainly understand what you were saying about the good old days because campaigning used to be quite vigorous, campaigning used to be quite fun, and the party sheds used to be a place to go
Yeah,
and sit down and have a good time. And
yeah,
those days are, of course, gone.
yeah.
Monica, you actually, as I said, you won the Samambula Tamavua open constituency seat against Dr. Mbamba. How would you describe that win?
Ah, it was an exception. It was an exceptional win for the party. Um, like I said, we spent 20 days in preparing and getting everything going. Excuse me. It was just hard work at the end of it when we got the results. I must say it took us, I think mine was almost like people were saying it was almost like a rugby match because they were not announcing the numbers as fast as we would have expected.
Mhm.
So really we were actually in a stressful position at that point in time, and my entire team was actually up all night at the sheds. So when they finally did come in with the announcement early morning, everybody was too tired. And all I remember is a whole lot of us just, my team just went to my apartment and they just crashed. I was on my way. My dad said, I'll drop you. I said, no, we need to pick up some bread. We picked up some bread. And as we're driving down towards home, and I go, Dad, I said, we're in Parliament. It
Mm.
just dawned on me like that. And I was like, he looked at me and I think he actually laughed at that point in time. And I said, the word that came out of my mouth at that time is we've got so much work to do. I've got responsibility now on my shoulder. So it wasn't about the win, but it was about, the weight of the responsibility I was going to have. So that's what the win was about at that time. I don't think anything settled in that we had done something extremely great.
Great recollections. I admire you for that. At that particular moment, it just dawned on you, as you said, the weight just went on your shoulders and the responsibility that you thought about. Talking of which, how was the experience for you in Parliament, albeit a short one? We'll come to that in a moment.
Yeah.
Talk about that experience first.
Parliament was when you are thrown into something, you've got to have your head on your shoulder, good and proper. You've got to be alert. There was so much teaching that came through at the beginning, and then like we were trained. It's a whole new area that you need to read a lot. We were put into committees. Because there was only two women candidates that won in Labour in that particular year. One became a minister, and our leader, Mr. Chaudhry, said we need somebody in Parliament. we need that women representation in Parliament. We've got one as a minister, one in. So my job was to get into those committees. We were assigned a committee, so it was a lot of reading, a lot of assessing, and then we had questions that we needed to put into Parliament. There was a lot of work, and I must say, it wasn't an easy thing just to get started, because you've been thrown into an area which is absolutely new for you, and you had to read. You needed to understand things fast. That, in a nutshell, that's all I can say right at this point. Yeah.
All right. And what would you say was the greatest challenge in that parliamentary class of 2006 for you?
The greatest challenge.
Mm,
Well, I think at that time it was trying to learn as fast as you could.
okay.
There was a lot to absorb. There was a lot to do. You get piles of paper, piles of paperwork. You need to read submissions, and you need to actually make sure that you've got the answers when questions are asked. So that was a big challenge, trying to absorb everything. It was a challenge, learning fast.
Okay. Now, Monica, some people have observed the misogynistic attitudes within Parliament. Did you observe such attitudes or did you experience them?
During my time, no, but there was an incident right at the beginning when we were having a meeting, when first day into Parliament, and there was a pile of invites, and I turned around and I said, "Do we need to attend all of this?" And somebody had been there earlier, said no. And I said, "But we need to respond, RSVP." And I said, "Okay, I'll RSVP mine." And suddenly, a group of men who were there just said, "Could you do mine? Could you RSVP for me?" And I remember asking everyone, calling them to attention and saying, "I have an announcement to make." And there was two things I said. And I said, I'm no one's messenger or secretary, and I'm no one's Tigo. And you know what? That was such a good start, because after that, I forgot to RSVP, but all the guys had done their RSVP. And it was a good start. It just put all of us in our place, put it that way, at least for me.
Well
So,
done, well done. I mean, I would not have expected anything else from Vijay Raghwan's daughter. You put them on the spot. Well done. Still on misogynistic attitudes, the Prime Minister of Fiji speaks of gender balance. How do you reconcile such hypocrisy? I mean, here is a cry to have more women in Parliament. Then, on the other hand, when Parliament is reduced to misogynistic behavior, there is no outcry from the Prime Minister condemning such boorish behavior. Any views on that?
um, maybe it's because his speeches are very likely written for him. So gender balance remarks are to ensure that the right policies are outlined. Most of us reckon the real person, tends to come out when he speaks off the cuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So if he's reading from written speeches, it somehow seems to just go over his head, perhaps. Let's leave it there. Now, Monica, the 2006 coup by Bainimarama and his RFMF soldiers put an end to your parliamentary life, as it did to other parliamentarians after the 2006 elections. How did that make you feel?
To me, any coup is an act of treason. It sets not only us back, it sets the country back, quite a few years. And having lived in Fiji through the first two coups, the probability of having another one was pretty high, considering the warnings that had been issued on the bills at that time by the commander. When I signed up, to stand up for Parliament, I knew I had to be alert to what may come. We were there representing the people. People tend to forget we were still a very young democracy. The first coup happened just 17 years after independence. And I must say, on the day of the takeover, I was actually in a committee meeting. It was a room that overlooked the entrance to the Parliament. over which the soldiers climbed over that day. So in short, we deal with what's in front of us. We stayed where we had to stay until we were told to step down. So that was probably the best, how I dealt with it.
But in essence, did you at all feel cheated out of your time in Parliament? I mean, you were there to serve a term, and the coup of December 2006 robbed you of that. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yes, but it was more so that we were not able to stand for the people who supported us, because it was people who went out there, spent their time. When you're electing somebody, you're doing it with some thought, and we were there to represent people. I felt the people were cheated, as was I. In many cases, some of the candidates had actually probably lost quite a lot of money. And based on things like this, that's probably why we don't have too many women probably standing up for elections, coming forward. These
Okay.
are some of the deterrents, yes.
You are watching Sashi Singh's Talking Point, and our chief guest today is Ms. Monica Raghwan, former Member of Parliament in Fiji and a provisional candidate for the Fiji Labour Party. Please like and share the SSTP page on your own timelines so that as many people as possible can be part of today's interview. And some of you are sending stars, and I thank you for that as well. Monica, you contested the 2014 as well as the 2018 elections for the Fiji Labour Party. How would you describe those elections under the new electoral system in contrast to the election that you contested uh, in 2006, the 97 Constitution?
In the previous electoral system that was used, we had people representing areas, constituencies that we had. We had the preferential system, so all the votes ended up being accounted for rather than wasted. Under this system, there's only one constituency, and we have in this current in the 2020 hopefully election, we have 55 national candidates. So you really don't have anybody representing areas. You just have 55 right across the board.
Okay. So it's a national constituency, obviously.
Yeah.
How is the Fiji Labour Party placed for the forthcoming election in terms of support on the ground level, finances, and campaigning, etc.?
We've been received well. I think that's because we've got our leader back in the game. There's been a groundswell of support in recent times. And that's actually quite nice. We've got more and more people coming up and saying we were Labour, we're now back. We've got that, and that's encouraging. Finance is it's been a problem. It's been a problem since the the new laws that came in place. And as for the campaigning, well, we've been out on the ground, and I think the person who's been most out in the ground is our leader, Mr. Chaudhry. He's been working hard. I think he's, in the last couple of days, he's probably attended about 5-6 meetings. Actually, he's a hard act to follow.
Yes, big shoes to fill in any political game, that's for sure. Let us now look at today's Fiji. What do you think are the major areas or issues of concern, that is, of significant concern to the population now?
I think high on the list would be cost of living. Everybody talks about that. And of course, linked in some way is poverty. And poverty in turn is associated with poor nutrition and health, probably why we have a high number of NCDs. We have an acute housing shortage for low-income earners. And of course, probably something that's very important is access to good health facilities, machines. Is also, sorry, not machines, medicine is also shortcoming, and clean drinking water or continuous running water. In some areas, we always seem to sort of not have running water.
Well summarized there. So let us look at some specifics now. There are a lot of households in Fiji that are going through significant stress and traumas of daily life. And you are there, obviously, during your campaigning. You must come across a good cross section of people. How are the women, the mothers, the homemakers facing the day-to-day issues of economic hardship today? What do they say?
Well, you know what? Those who face it are best in a position to tell you, but not everybody speaks it out. But I can tell you, it's a big balancing act for women. Um, it's always learning how to live within your means. Um, you find that women have a tendency of when they have to sort of make provision for meals, they need to. A lot of them look for things that you can stretch. For example, dal, soup, and I believe a lot of times a lot of things like more carbs is added into your diet. Probably explains why we have these NCDs. Some of them get some extra work. Some supplement it by doing gardening, in a nutshell. But I'm sure there's a lot more areas that the women who sew, stitch, etc. And in recent time there was a Brock market today, but you always find there's a lot of women out there with their stalls as well.
You mentioned poverty, the effects of poverty. How do you think families are facing or coping with the effects of poverty?
um, I don't think too well. I don't think too well. Because you sometimes go into a shopping center and you find parents are there, children pick up things, and it could be something very small, and you see they need to put it back. That's actually quite heartbreaking. You see a lot of people doing planting as part of their needs. You find people looking for extra jobs, and a lot of people cut back on unnecessary expenditure. You see, what we see currently is we see a lot of women or children, particularly children, who are selling parcels, purini, and things, not only at Bowser's shopping complexes, outside. They're selling it from office to office. Um, and then, of course, we have the unfortunate. It's not so much women, but we do also have the men. Before they would ask, do you have 20 cents? Now they just say, do you have loose change? Or they just ask you for $1.
Mhm.
So, it's not easy, but those are some of the things I think that's how they cope. They're coping currently.
Monica, an unfortunate side effect of economic hardship, loss of employment, alcoholism, etc., is the rise in domestic violence and cases of sexual abuse. Now, these are always on the rise in Fiji, and the statistics are alarming. On Thursday last week, Shamima Ali, the coordinator of the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, released shocking statistics that revealed that they had seen 209 child rape survivors from January to September this year. The age of the child rape survivors range from 3 years to 17 years. Now, this is horrendous statistics. Why do you think there is an increasing trend in such incidences in Fiji? It just doesn't seem to curb.
No, no. I could say to a large extent poverty, but not necessarily the boundaries. The two big evils of our society, sexual abuse, is too heartbreaking. It's a violation of a person, their soul, and the stronger over the weaker. A total act, in my opinion, of cardness. As a society, I think we're supposed to be protecting our young, and yet there's such a there's a high number of violations. Now, no jobs, like you said, alcohol, drugs, you know, and also I think what might not have been said was we have a shocking number also of incest case. It is more shocking right now, and this is what we're talking about. It's more shocking that somebody who's had a jail term is allowed to come out and play a sport, and we all go and watch. So you can put it down to a whole lot of things, whether it's no work, alcohol, like I said, alcohol, drugs, and just, an empty mind is a devil's playfield.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there must be a report on other things. There must be a report on other things, and obviously you need to know what they are, right? So yeah, they would have done a research on that one to see.
When we're looking at shocking statistics like that, I mean, where do you apportion the failure to? Is it a societal failure, or is the act of domestic violence, sexual abuse, including child rape, an individual failure?
Both, I would think both, because the buck stops at you, an individual. Behavioral patterns arise from what you are surrounded by, what you're taught, family, community, or social media, or the things you get involved with. In terms of domestic violence, it's always a form. Sometimes, men or women, whoever it is, they come in and the fights usually occur because of defending oneself or disagreeing, choosing to disagree, or hiding one's action in some way. And I've always said an empty mind is the devil's playfield. And I think, that's what I think. And what we are grateful to are the religious groups, NGOs, and families and communities that take a stand on these issues. But it's both. It's basically both.
Let's talk about priorities. What are the priorities that should be put in place to curb the rising incidence of domestic violence and sexual abuse in Fiji? For instance, do you think there has to be a change in the mindset, in the attitude of lawmakers? Should there be tougher penalties, for instance?
Oh, definitely. Labour has plans of setting up a domestic violence and child exploitation task force. This will be funded by the government, and we would refer to the consolidation fund, and of course our alternative budget. Violence and sexual abuse has actually no gender. Even though the girl child has largely been targeted, I personally think that the two should be treated separately. Um, law enforcement, law enforcement should be taken more seriously, and I think we have a no drop policy charge already in place. We need counseling. We need to provide counseling, the types of counseling, and action needs to be taken by society as well. Like I said, do we boycott the game because one of the guys who's playing, has not served his time? He's been actually taken out to play this particular game, and you know, uh, where do we stand as a society on these things? And I think in the case of sexual abuse, there should be very strong deterrence. And
Okay.
lawmakers have to take all of this into account.
All right. We'll leave that thought for a while and move on. I mean, that is a topic that perhaps we can be talking about for hours on end. It's a huge concern. No doubt about the statistics that come out from Fiji is a huge concern. Let me now change our focus to environmental issues.
Sorry, if I may just just
Yeah,
just add something to the other one. Um,
sure.
those statistics are the ones that probably have been registered, are
Hmm.
the ones registered. There would be a lot more that may not be registered. So, it is a great concern when you're talking about such things. That's what I thought we should just add.
Well, it's a good point you've added because a number of these instances never get reported.
That's
Women
correct.
women do suffer in silence, and very few of them, for the sake of their children, for the sake of the sanctity of their marriage, they decide not to go ahead with these complaints. Because
Yeah.
once these complaints come to the forefront, then most times legal action takes place, and it ends up breaking the family at the best of times.
Yeah. But Shashi, it's not always just women and the girl child.
Hmm.
That we have cases, where men are also abused. We have the vulnerable boys. So it's
Yes.
not just you know the focus is widening now. It's not like before where you would have more on the women and the girl child. Now you have just about everybody.
Point well made, indeed well made. As I said, let me now change our focus to environmental issues. What do you think are the major environmental issues facing Fiji currently?
Uh, um, well, different types of pollution, I guess. We've got pollution from factories. We've got the vehicles, still vehicles. More vehicles you get, the more carbon monoxide, the more soot. Um, but we do a lot of the companies that we now have that actually emit these soots. We have what we call carbon catchers or filters that can be used. We have the throwing of rubbish, which is still, it's all about civic pride. We've got indiscriminate sand and gravel extraction, which causes erosions, particularly if they are out in the river areas, which affect the food source from the river, and also transportation on those rivers. We have poorly designed waterways or just clogged drains. This leads to flooding, soil erosion, and crop damage. And eventually, when you have a lot of water stagnation all over the place, you actually, you have disease, spread of disease. We have the rising sea levels that affect the low-lying areas. I've been out snorkeling in the last couple of months in various areas, and it's amazing. In some of these areas, there's a lot of dead coral reef, and it's also signaling that there's no actual food for the fish. So, if that is dying due to bleaching or warming, um, food source again is going to be a significant issue in time to come. And everyone talks about reforestation, but I think without thinking too much about it. It's good, but it has its side effects.
Having mentioned the issues that you have, what should be done to address these?
Well, in the case of the first two, which was pollution and throwing of rubbish, it'll be good to get our municipalities, the council back, city councils, and the all. So they had an important job to play, and that would actually ease a lot of work for government. An administrator is one person, but I think it'll be good to get people involved, get everyone involved, get everyone talking. We need to work with stakeholders. And we also need to look at how we're going to rehabilitate the reefs. We've got scientists who can actually do that. We talk about resilient and tolerant coral species. Also, we need to enforce stricter laws without fear or favor, and possibly review the laws to see where we can do better to protect the environment. And in the case of reforestation, what people don't realize, we create watersheds, and in turn, we have more rainfall. So how do we harvest this water so that we don't have massive soil erosion and just water all over the place? But we can actually make use of that. So I think these are some of the things that, yeah, that's I think should be done.
Now, the current government is always present at the COP and makes it representations for climate change issues. Do you think their representations are well intentioned and meaningful, or is there some other agenda at play?
Well, it is a place where we do get funds, right? That is, but really, it's a bit of a leading question. So I think you'll probably have to ask them to answer that question, because those who go would know the purpose of them going, and hopefully you get one of maybe one of the other parties to come in, and they might be able to answer you direct.
Well, I'm not going to hold my breath for that. All right. How effectively then do you think that climate change matters and issues have been tackled on the home front in Fiji?
Look, you know, climate change and change climate change. Well, put it this way: when you don't look after your environment, uh, it changes the ecological, if you like, the whole atmosphere, the whole thing. So let us have a look at what's happening to our environment. We have say, case in point, the Free Soul case, which had the destruction of a reef. It's been a big issue. We have the Boer bauxite, shipping of raw soil. Why are we shipping out our soil? Then we have the Namosi copper mining. Question will be how badly affected is the environment after the matter?
Mhm.
So I don't know if that answers you, but we've got all these cases, so I can't see anything that's been really tackled at the moment.
You've touched on a couple of issues such as the bauxite mines, etc. And you've made a good point that after it's been excavated, what happens to what's left behind? I mean, that is a case in hand, and obviously,
Hmm.
um, it seems that there is no answer currently in Fiji for that. Would you
Yeah,
agree to that?
yeah. Well, I think some of them. I believe that some of the Matangalis have been trying to stop some of this work being carried out, but because they've had pre-written agreements, that's not allowed them to actually be able to back out of some of these agreements, which is a bit sad because you only wiser after something's been done or you've started something.
Yes, indeed. Now, you mentioned that when I mentioned COP, you said that we attend most of these events hoping for a big grant. Now, how has the money obtained from the climate change grants been utilized in Fiji? Do you have any information on that?
Absolutely no idea. Um, I don't think there's been any real accountability for it. But then again, I stand to be corrected because you don't really have a budget line for climate change as it is. It may be spread out over different budget lines. I'm not sure. So I really can't speak too much on that because I have not
All
seen
right.
any accountability. Yeah.
I did read that at the end of February 2020, New Zealand made a pioneering international donation to a fund to help Fijian communities forced to move by rising sea and extreme weather driven by climate change. And that was a $2 million donation, which was a part of a broader $150 million package of climate change assistance to Fiji aimed to support efforts already underway to resettle people at risk from sea level rise and other climate related threats. And I believe, I think I stand to be corrected as well, some 6 villages have already been relocated. However, but as you say, the dollars and cents have never ever been sort of tabled or shown where the money's going, how it has been utilized. I just thought I'd ask you that question. Now, I am fascinated with your background in botany and seed technology. You have said that there's a growing emphasis on food sustainability, water supply, and seed security around the world in these times of changing climatic conditions. Firstly, Monica, please explain what do these three things mean? What is the critical assessment here?
Well, the basic needs in life, put it that way, is food, water, and shelter, and seed secure. Well, in terms of water, you really can't live without water. And if you look at what's happening all around the world, I'm not a big fan of the buzzword climate change. I believe there's several other ways of saying it. The but we tend to have these. We are now experiencing, in the news, every time you turn it on, there's flooding in places, there's fires in places. And, if you've got fire, you've lost your, sort of, you're talking about food loss. If there's a flood, again, food loss. And if you've got massive flooding everywhere else, there's a lot of things that get affected all at once, including your water supply, including, there's a lot of things. So in Fiji, we're quite, and we tend to be interdependent. We're all interdependent, throughout the world, globally. We rely on wheat from one country, we rely on oil from some place, rely on this from some imports. And if you don't have, if in case of an emergency, suppose everything's hit, um, are we ready? Do we have the backup, to feed our people? If there's sort of a massive amount of water everywhere, how are we able to cope? These are all questions that get raised in terms of a national disaster or a state of when a state of emergency arises. So for me, these three, you need to have the backup. Where's our backup?
You asked a very important question. Are we ready? Are we prepared for it? What is the answer?
I don't think we are. I don't think we are, because when you talk about cyclones and hurricanes now, they're like category 5. And we've been fortunate, very fortunate in the silver, central eastern area. We've not really been hit too hard. But the other parts, we've seen the devastation that's taken place. Nothing stays. We've seen it in different parts of the world. If it were to hit, God forbid, if it were to hit the entire nation, where are we? We are small. We're tiny in landmass, but we do have the advantage of having quite a few islands, where you can have separation on and being able to keep, like seed or planting material. But Shashi, really, I mean, every time I think about it, I'm wondering what are we going to do, and I think there are plans underway, but I've yet to see something solid enough for me to say, yeah, we've got it.
Do you think there has to be a common sense approach? I mean, look, let's face it, just this week, the minister, one of the ministers, came forward and said that Fiji is going to face something like 3 cyclones, and this could be absolutely devastating for the country, let alone one. If Fiji is hit by 3 cyclones, you can well imagine. I mean, as you said, when we look at things like food, water supply, seeds, etc., we don't have them in stock, and in any disaster, food is destroyed, then this is a disaster waiting to happen. Um, what should people do?
Well, one of the things I see in terms of, I can talk about water at this point in time,
Hmm.
is harvesting water, every home, maybe, and I'm sure council have, or the government as a whole may have already had this plan that when you put in your, when you put in your plans to go and build a house, you should have provisions for a tank, which then you're able to harvest water off your roof from the your gutter, so that when you have water coming through in large amounts, it's not coming through the pipe and everything flowing into your waterways. Now, if every and each house did that, can you imagine the how much water we would save, or how much water would be withdrawn from the waterways? um, I see that as one. uh, as for food, we've been encouraged, I think, in recent times since we've had the pandemic, that we grow our own food in our gardens. And in Fiji, you know very well that almost anything grows. You just have to drop a seed, and by the grace of God, everything grows. So, apart from us looking after ourselves individually, um, we still need a national or a government. We need a national program to actually help fix that. Those are just
And
my.
and I find it amazing that being the country it is, where we have faced so many cyclones and hurricanes in the past, that we still do not have a national program for issues of this nature. I just find that mind boggling.
Well, look, Shashi, if I may add, in the past, I remember it was in the 80s. I was in high school. We had, I think it was 5: Eric, Nigel, Oscar, Gavin, and Hina. We called it Enough. But the categories were different. The categories were lower then. And we do have, our houses have been built to a certain standard of category 5. But when you start getting category 5 cyclones and anything more, then of course you have to relook at the designs. And I think the government has been looking at that at the moment. Relook at, what we need to do when you get category 5 and above, because everything's built to run about category 5 anyway. So, there's a whole look at, all these new laws in construction, etc.
All right, now, how can botany and plant breeding be of assistance to the agricultural community of Fiji?
Mhm. Botany and plant breeding actually is a bit of a specialized area of agriculture as a whole. And when I talk about plant breeding or botany, it's about assessing plants. When we talk about seeds itself, we talk about traditional heritage seeds, particularly in these times of GMOs, genetic modified, and hybrids. because hybrids don't, they already serve one generation. That's why it's called a hybrid. One, and then you form a new seed, and that's the outcome. Whereas the resilient varieties are usually old heritage seeds or traditional varieties. And they seem to have evolved and they've seemed to have come through and they remain. So, yeah, when we're talking about agriculture, uh, there's an area for it. But it's,
Okay.
like I said, a little bit more specialized. Mm.
With that particular thought and your background in botany, what are your views on the ailing sugar industry then?
Mm. Well, you know what? I really have no experience in the sugar industry, but I can say a few things. One is you need to have farmers. If you want an industry, you need to have farmers. We have farmers. Um, we have we have machines. We had the mills, and the mills probably don't are not probably in that. Let's just say, in the past when we had heavy tonnage, put it long, a lot of tonnage, the mills worked. Now, they're growing old. When things begin to get old, you need to maintain them. We need maintenance. We need also to probably restructure the whole thing. If you have lesser output, you probably need something smaller and maybe something much more modern. Now, Labour Party um, has quite a big policy on the sugar, because they still believe, sugar is strength for the, it used to be the backbone of the nation in terms of economy. We're looking at a whole lot of things, including reform existing harvesting and transportation system. We're looking at the upgrading of the aging mills. We're looking at the review and operations of FSC. We're also looking at to support the private sector into, investments into manufacturing, and of course the byproducts, anything that we can actually do with that, whether it's biogas or anything else. Um, One of the other main reasons for the ailing industry, I think, has a lot to do with maybe government interference. Before, we used to have a lot of the industry used to be quite independent. Currently, I believe there are no farmers' voices. They've removed the elected sugarcane growers council, and I think a lot of people have kind of lost confidence in the industry. And I believe that the cost of production is also pretty high. So there's really and there's really also no certainty on the guaranteed price of sugar. It's a
So
bit of a
what you've
mouthful,
just
but yeah.
Yeah. So what you've just told us is that your Labour Party has plans and policies for the agricultural sector, the sugar industry, for instance.
Yeah, definitely. Because if you've got, as you know, our leader has, he's been part of the National Farmers Union for quite some time, and of course, he's got a lot of experience in that. And sugarcane has, in the past, been the backbone. And another thing, at the moment, there's no real substitute for sugar. You can talk about stevia, you can talk about anything else, but things like stevia cannot be used in baking. It cannot be used in certain other things. So finding, if you've got the substitute, it's different. But sugar still has its value in the world. It's a largely used commodity.
All right. Now, in the past, Fiji had a somewhat vibrant agricultural sector with sugar, as we've mentioned, copra, etc., being at the forefront. What happened? How did these sectors decline? You've mentioned, for instance, the sugar industry, but what has really happened?
Well, my understanding, I mean, look, I was still in leaving high school at that time. So what I understand and believe, after having spoken to some people, is after the 1987 coup, there was a deliberate move. A deliberate move was made to move away from sugar to tax-free factories and manufacturing factories.
Mhm.
And of course, these particular manufacturing companies would use imported raw materials, which of course we couldn't compete with because of the cheap labor. Um, Agriculture, which used to be the backbone of our country, of our economy, was totally ignored at that time. So this led to a serious rural decline and poverty in those places, and our exports went down. as did our revenue. And over a period of time, due to the declining revenue, our buying power also diminished. Um, and of course, by the time we had COVID, say around about 2019, I think by that time, tourism had accounted for about 40% of or more of our GDP. And then, of course, we had our dependence on remittance. So, you know, we really lost what was really important to us, because for a country to have a good standing in terms of their money, you need to have the buying power, and buying power is actually got based on our ability to export.
Hmm.
I don't know if that answers your question there.
No, no, you have. Let me ask you, do you think there ought to be a far greater emphasis on incentives for farmers to diversify into other types of crops? I mean, Fiji could be such a large supply of fresh produce, for instance, exporting things like okra, barley leaves, taro, cassava. There's a huge market outside of Fiji for these things. Um, what do you think?
Well, definitely. There's a big area. There's a big area. There's always a growing area, and of course, the answer is of course. Um, but you have one problem. We need to be able to bring the farmers back. There has to be incentives to bring people back, bring them back into the fields, bring them, because there's big money. That's a lot of people don't realize. In farming, there's quite a lot of money. And now with the growing demand for organics, Fiji's in a very, very good position actually, because most we have very fertile land. And yes, the emphasis definitely, yes, we should go that way. We definitely should go that way. We definitely need to find the funds to actually establish some of this, what we are calling in labor the estate farming. That is also part of our manifesto. Also, disclaimer, through consolidated funds that we're going to have, and also referring to our alternative budget that Labor's going to come out with.
Looking forward to reading your Labour Party's manifesto when it comes out. Should be an interesting document. Have a break, have a drink of water, Monica. We'll
Yeah,
come back to
thanks.
you in just a moment or so. You are
Yes, thank
watching Sashi Singh's Talking Point, and our chief guest today is Ms. Monica Raghwan, former member of Parliament in Fiji and a provisional candidate for the Fiji Labour Party in the forthcoming general elections. Please like and follow the SSTP page so that as many people can view today's episode. And if you have recently started following SSTP, let me tell you that you can watch all the previous programs from episode 1 to episode 39 last week by going to SSTP on Facebook or on YouTube. You can watch at your own leisure and pleasure all the past programs. SSTP, the Thinking People's Program, and to Francis Raivembe, thank you for the stars. Ella Vosa Naivalu, thank you very much as well. And to others who have sent stars, your names bypassed on the comments list, but I thank you all for those stars. Monica, the health and medical sector have been in the news as of late. We have had so many changes of dates for heart procedures to start at the Lautoka Hospital. The situation seems grim, and this was confirmed by our chief guest last week, Dr. John Fathiaki. What are your views on the status of health and medical facilities in Fiji?
Well, I'm sure I couldn't have said it better than Dr. Fatiaki, because that's his field. Um, but look, we've got good doctors, we've got good nurses. Um, but our hospitals are poorly equipped. And of course, we have a lot of people that come through. So there's an overburden on whatever's available. It's burdened. So, you know, yes, we've got those issues. I think they've been well set out, and at the end of the day, I think everybody's suffering. So yeah, that's all I can say, is that yes, there is a major problem. And it's
So,
actually
have
burden.
hmm, go
Yeah,
on.
yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead.
complete that.
No, and I'm just saying it's basically a burden on whatever we have, because everybody's kind of coming into the main sectors. Like I'll just give you an example. We've got, say, Nasinu and Nakasi. Now, we probably have a population of about 60,000 people in Valley level. By right, any place that has over 60,000 people, if it's a small area, it actually should be declared, I believe, not a township, a city. Right. So when you actually have that many people in an area, you must have a hospital. Right. You must have those facilities to cater for that many people. But we've actually, in all these areas, we just have health centers. And that's, and so because you can't, you've got too many people there, everybody's flocking towards the main hospitals. Now, you will have an overburdening of that, won't you? I recall when I was on the board of visitors at one time, one particular month we had a huge number of births, and they didn't have enough beds. They were actually putting down mattresses on the floor to cater for it. So, because many people did not want to give birth in the outer islands because of there were lack of facilities. So yes, I mean, that's just adding to the conversation, and it's something that really, really needs to. We really, really need to do something about it. And I think that requires really government willpower. Actually, they really need to be motivated. To actually say yes, we need to do something about this.
So, having said that, do you think the government has done enough to provide adequate health care to the people of Fiji?
Well, I think with all what everybody is saying is true. We keep running out of medicines. So, like we said, you've got the doctors, you've got the nurses, and right now, and unfortunately for us, because we aren't able to retain them, we are, if you like, exporting our own resources, which is our own people. And so, no, of course, we're not adequately. We just don't have what it takes right now to look after our people.
All right, now, what are the Fiji Labour Party's plans for the health and medical sector's problems that Fiji has? Please be careful of the costings element of the electoral laws, as I don't want you to get FICAC'd in any way.
Well, this is what we're saying about all the limitations we have, and everybody's complaining because, in the past you could talk openly. It is a time of campaigning and elections, and it's ridiculous. So anyway, whatever I say, whatever we're going to do, this is all going to come out in our manifesto when it's ready. And like we've said, we've got Labour Party has an alternative budget. And for us to fund most of this, there is the consolidated funds, and we will be able to find money through that. And so basically, we're looking at we are talking about access to specialist experts, and also to resort and to add resources for the management of the hospitals to improve its services. Also, we're looking at a national health insurance scheme. Something similar to maybe Australia, but I think we've got something else in the pipeline which may work even better. And I believe it will work because I've given it quite a bit of thought, and we've shared that before. We're looking at staffing. Doctors and nurses have to be, they need to be rewarded for their work. And also to reduce the hours. How are we going to do that? I'm not too sure if we have a lack of, don't have enough doctors and nurses, but there are things that we need to look in. We need to increase the stock of medicine. That needs to be there. Also, we need to upgrade medical facilities. I think these are some of the basic things that need to be done if we want to overhaul the medical system. And also, like I said before, we can't put too much pressure on one area. We may have to start looking at ways of increasing our health outreach.
Great.
And like a disclaimer, that's how we're going to pay for it, is through the consolidated funds and, of course, alternate budget.
All right. As I said, really looking forward to that document, your party's manifesto, being released sometime soon. Let me now shift our discussion towards education and firstly discuss the University of the South Pacific grant saga. Now, you attended the University of the South Pacific, and you may therefore know what timely grants do for the running of the different educational programs, etc. Monica, what are your views with regards to the Fiji First government withholding the USP's allocation of grants, something to the tune of an estimated $80 million?
Well, It's a bit baffling because when you are signatory to, to an agreement, and we have the university within our own, it's got University of the South Pacific and it's based in your own country. There are requirements because the government has, they've made a commitment, and to me, they must and they should honor that obligation.
Mhm. Okay. And what impact do you think does the withholding of the USP grants have on the region then?
Well, well, it has a big impact, I guess. It affects our students mainly because the grants that come in are, from the region is used to subsidize funds. That's from the outside. But our students are missing out, and as far as I know, many of them are probably borrowing more, and that's not a good thing at all. And as for the institution itself, I can just imagine how they're managing because this is where your academics are. And them, you don't have the funds to run normally on a day-to-day basis. You've got the administration to think about. You've got I'm sure there's a lot of things. Infrastructure must be held behind as well. Their programs must all, also be pretty much, stopped or staggered to try and move forward. So it's just a sad situation. It's a sad situation because at the end of the day, our people are the ones that are going to be suffering or are suffering, not are going to, but are suffering.
Do you have any comments on the unceremonious manner in which the Vice Chancellor of the University of the South Pacific, Professor Paul Aluwalia, and his wife were removed from Fiji?
You know what? This was actually very embarrassing um, as a Fijian because this is not the Pacific way of doing things. He was denied the due process of the law, and it was just a very, very sad thing to have happened and for us to have witnessed, because this is not the Pacific way. This is not Fiji's hospitality. This is not how we treat people.
All right, well said. Monica, as Fiji heads to the elections, figures show that some 20,000 plus students are registered to vote, and these same students are affected by the grant saga. What would you say to these students if you could address them? What would you say to them?
Well, I think one is to hang in there. And I believe there's going to be, we really need to then, if you feel that there's we need to change, get to the voting booth. Get to the voting booth and make that happen. And if you want to know who's got the best policies or who can help you, get onto the sites of all the political parties and check out their um, manifesto and see what the plans are for the future. We have a lot of things there for the students, but this week or today is also in our Sunday calendar, Youth Sunday or Tikana Youth Sunday, and we've been told to tell our young ones, have courage, have faith, move on, and hopefully the light is going to be coming very, very soon. So, and hang in there, because I've heard so many of them who they just don't know what to do. So that's all I can
Okay.
say at this point in time.
I think that's good advice, indeed, good advice. Now, the Minister for Education in Fiji has announced that Fiji will now have 4 school terms. What do you think? Is this good or bad for the education system?
I'm sure an assessment has been done. For me, if you're going to have anything more than what you already have, I'm assuming that they've figured out how it's going to affect how it's going to affect the system, and whether our students are going to be learning more. What is the outcome? Is it going to be better for the students? Is it easier for the teachers to handle? Is it a win-win situation? And whether they're going to, but basically, at the end of the day, whether the term or the year is better utilized in terms of what they plan on doing. And I'm assuming the assessments have been done, because there's plus points and there may be minus points. So you just don't copy a system. You need to assess why.
Mhm. Nicely answered. All right, well, let us now look at some aspects of daily life in Fiji. What are your thoughts on the fragile state of the infrastructure in the country, especially when it comes to water supply and electricity? There are daily water cuts, as we know, never ending electricity disruptions, etc. How bad is it really? I mean, please do tell us.
Well, you've already said it. You've already said it's daily. But you know what, Shashi? What we need to take into account is the fact that a lot of this infrastructure is pretty old, like I've said before. They're pretty old. And, if something was done 50 years ago, I don't think people would have thought in the next 50 years, just, in terms of population, in terms of usage, in terms of, maintenance over the years. I mean, like we've spoken about how we've, economically, we've kind of been, our buying power is a lot higher, and then it's kind of gone down. So whatever the money that we have, whatever the money is that's assigned, I mean, look, I mean, really, put in over, I think I can be corrected, 400 to maybe $500 million on roads. Why roads when you could put it into something essential like water? When it needs a lot of work. We've got an old system. It needs to be changed. And there's a lot of heavy burden based on the population. So, you know, what else would you like me to say on that?
Well, you've said that some infrastructures are more than 50 years old, which brings me to my next question. How effectively, then, do you think that the Fiji First government, who've been in power for the last 16 years, how effectively have they been addressing this problem? And why do you think it is taking such a long time, in fact, many, many, many years to solve these problems? Don't you think they ought to prioritize things?
Well, definitely they need to prioritize. I mean, look, I really don't know why it's taking so long. There's so many, you know, there's just so many thoughts. I just don't understand why it's taking so long. That's
Hmm.
that's all I can say. Why something that important is taking so long, and why it's not at the top of a priority list, I do not understand.
And in terms of your party, the Fiji Labour Party, this would be a top priority?
Well, definitely. I think right from the beginning, we've always said, I remember even when I was there in 2006, that, water is a right, like education and like housing. These are
Mhm.
some of the rights that we have, these are our rights.
You mentioned at the start of the program, when I asked you about daily life in Fiji, some of the issues, you mentioned the cost of living. Let me ask you about that. How difficult is it to fill a shopping basket these days? I mean, what can you say about the cost of living issues affecting the people of Fiji?
You know, previously when you had money, even if you had $100, you could fill up a full, what do you call it, a trolley. Now, in 20 bucks or no, $100, it's very, very hard to see, much in your your bag or in your trolley. Look, the way I see it, we are importing more and exporting less. And I think the way, we are more of a consumer based economy now. The Reserve Bank had recently said that up to, I think, 11 to 12% of our inflation is bought in based on imports. Labour's policy is to grow our own food and to go for import substitution, made in Fiji items. I think we've been trying to do that, even, current government, and to bring down, and I think some of these things will bring down the cost of living. And hopefully we don't have to, stop and think next time, I've only got this much and this is all I'm going to get. So if we change the way we think, change our mindset, change the way we do things, um, we can change those around.
Monica, when one looks at figures in relation to Fiji, some experts have put poverty at about 40, some have even put it at around 50%. Now, these are staggering numbers in anybody's books. In reality, on the ground level, do you see people suffering?
Definitely. Every day you can't help. Previously, you don't, no matter how little you had, you always find people well dressed, well dressed. Even now you see them, but now you see it's a different story. You see, like I said, mentioned before, we have more children out there selling things, parcels, purinis and stuff. We never used to see children doing that before. And when parents begin to send children out to do things, you know very well that there are other chores that are happening, and they need to go and do other things to make sure that money comes in. So I would definitely say, there's a lot more. There's a lot more.
All right. I would now like to talk to you about our Fiji today. Once we were all party to that good old advertising slogan, Fiji, the way the world should be. These days, that slogan has disappeared along with a number of fundamentals. Fundamentals such as basic freedom. Let me ask you, Monica, from where you sit in Fiji today, is Fiji truly democratic?
Oh, um, that's not hard to answer if you just say no, but I think that doesn't explain anything. But look, when you have restricted union and workers' rights, media laws, um, you know, you know, people are harassed, and hence a lot of them have to work under, well, particularly media. If you look at it, they have to operate under a lot of constraint. um, Look at us right now. We have to. I'm just talking to you right now in terms of anything I say. I need to. This is only part of it, Shashi. When time we're talking about, I've got to tell you where the money comes from. Actually, the whole decree or that whole clause expects us to go back and write it and then submit it. So
Mhm.
you really begin to wonder: is this really democracy at the end of the day? Are we free to do what we're supposed to do, or what are the restrictions for? Why are we being restricted? That's, I mean, as far as I know, that's not democracy. I've always talked about rule by law and rule of law. you know um, you have rule of law where you have a constitution which is not tempered, which is not being amended to suit anyone. So you have you know the rule, right? Rule, and it's for everybody. Everybody goes by it. Then you have the rule by law, where every time you want to get something done or you want to move in a direction, something comes out. So you are constantly taking something out to direct us in a direction you want to go. So if you're going to do that, you're going to be continuing, you're going to be changing things as you go along. So is that true democracy? Do we, you know, it's
Mhm.
questionable. And I think everybody would say, no, we don't really have what we call a true democracy, because there's no freedom. We can't have those rights of demonstration, freedom of speech. Everything is, everything is sort of like, you've got something there to stop you from doing it. Or it's not so much to stop you, but they're how you present yourself. I
You've
hope that,
mentioned, yeah, it does. You mentioned freedom just now.
yeah.
Freedom of speech, freedom to assemble for peaceful protests, freedom to write an honest and transparent, in an honest and transparent manner, things that might not be complimentary to the incumbent government. I'm talking about the bread and butter issues of freedom. So, having said that, is freedom in Fiji a reality, or is it just a mere facade? Because some people would like to say that people in Fiji are free to do whatever they want.
Oh, we're free to wander around. We're free to, there's a lot of things we're free to do. Right. We're a lot. There's a lot of things we're free to do, but with certain things, obviously, we're not as free to do some of the things. There are, there are laws in place. There are clauses in place which restricts you from doing certain things. So you have a bit of both. You can be free to do certain things, and other things you have to be mindful about how freely you do it. And so, obviously, it's not free. Right. So, it's restrictive.
Okay, well, let us discuss the concept of fear in the nation then. As you probably heard in the news that I read at the beginning of this program, Archbishop Peter Lloyd Chong said this week that Fijians live in uncertain times. He said that we live in fear and that it is dangerous to speak your mind for truth and justice. Now, this is coming from the head of the Catholic Church in Fiji. Would you endorse the Archbishop's views, and is there a culture of fear amongst the general population to speak openly?
Shashi, if the Archbishop of the Catholic Church, which is also in the world probably the largest church, and he represents the Catholics in Fiji, if he said that, I don't think I'm in any position to say anything more. He himself has said that, and this is a man of the cloth. This is a man who has a lot of responsibility. He said it, and I think he speaks for many people. He speaks, if not for many, almost for all.
Okay, then simply put, what is the fear? What are people afraid of?
I think, as been said, the public perception of fear is victimization, harassment, and most likely the fear of being charged. And we've actually seen that in many cases.
Mm-hmm.
Now, everything comes in, if you do this, this is the result. If you do this, this is, jail term. If you do this, or being charged a particular amount of money. So, excuse me. Yeah. So, yeah. Victimization and
Go on, victimization. Okay.
no, that's what I'm saying. Victimization and harassment.
All right. Now, if one looks at the rule of law, do you think it is just and fair to one and all, or are there double standards being practiced in Fiji?
I think everybody's talking about that at present. I think based on the current fiasco of the Fiji First banner that's been up on the civic car park. I think that's why everybody's talking. Is it, how fair is it when everybody, all the political parties have been, told, this is the problem, and they've been reported to FICAC. And in this case, it's not really being taken straight up to FICAC. I mean, come on, the banner was designed and cut out to fit that place, right? So it can't have been made for the wrong place, one. And of course, like we said, the AG should know. I think Saini had said from NFP that, he was part of, probably he would have reviewed those act before it actually got passed. Yeah, so why the double standard? It's just simple. They did bring it down. In all fairness, they did bring it down. But, you're the AG, you're the Secretary General, your signature is on that banner. And of course, Council was the one that also was part that approved all the sides to put up things. How could they have allowed for such a thing? And it's not like it was meant for somewhere else. And like I said, it wasn't meant for somewhere else, and they suddenly brought it up because it was made to design. It was designed, it was built to size and design. So yes, I think if everyone's talking about the unfairness, I will go with them as well. It is absolutely unfair.
Talking about double standards, there have also been instances of some court matters. For example, the Solicitor General's case that is now on notice. A couple of other matters are on notice as well. The case brought by what many term the Magnificent Seven women who have taken their case to court in terms of the birth certificate issue for voting. These cases are on hold. They're on notice, whereas other cases are being expedited. Richard Naidu, for example. Again, does it spell of double standards? We've got to be careful. Judiciary is involved. We're not casting any aspersions on them.
Yeah, I think in the case of Richard Naidu and Solicitor General, I really can't comment on that because it's in court at the moment. What is of greater importance, I think, was the women who've actually taken up the rights of having then the name on their voter card having to be changed to their birth certificate name. I think it's ridiculous because when you're born with a birth certificate, and when you get married, they actually issue you with a marriage certificate with your married name on it. Now, many women, if not all, prefer to take their husband's name. Right? You're done with this section of your life, and you're now onto the second one. Why should you go back? Why do you need to go change it? It also reeks of gender imbalance also, because men continue with their surname and the women have the choice of changing their name. And I think in some cases you need to have both, if I'm not mistaken. I stand again to be corrected on this. Not only your maiden, your surname um, that you're born with, but also your husband's name on your birth certificate. It doesn't make sense because you were not born with that name. What happens in the event that, the woman decides, okay, there's a divorce coming up? What happens then?
Yes.
And I tell you what, I don't think women would want to go and get that changed at all. They would prefer to have what it is. And I think to me, they should have been allowed to have that name. And I do understand there's a law somewhere along the line that was put in place, but then why have a marriage certificate? Look, I think these things should have been debated well, explained to us well, with, referring to the laws that were in place. But it's very hard to tell a woman why should it be the woman who needs to change her name? So
Point.
it should have been talked. They should have discussed it, wider and allowed. But I'm glad the 7 women, if they've taken it up, great. They're fighting for a whole lot of women who. So yeah, great. Yeah.
All right. Take a break. Have a sip of water. You are watching Sashi Singh's Talking Point, and our chief guest today is Ms. Monica Raghwan, former Member of Parliament in Fiji and a provisional candidate for the Fiji Labour Party. Please like and share the SSTP page on your own timelines so that as many people as possible can be part of today's interview. Now, Monica, the election campaign has officially begun, and campaigning has been going on for a few months now. This campaigning period is unlike any other. How free are the political parties to campaign openly, and what are the limitations? You've touched on some of them.
I think it's, to be fair, we can, since I think 26th of April, we've been allowed to go out and campaign, right? And there's no restriction on that one, except for the fact is like I've already mentioned, that anything we say in terms of what we're going to be doing has to have attached how we're going to fund it. That is probably the biggest limitation, because it's you've got people of different backgrounds and you're talking to them, and then suddenly you're going to have to talk to them about something that they may not necessarily care about. So I think the restrictions is basically on that. That's one. And I think the harassment on that one is totally different thing, because you have people being questioned. We've had that in our case, where people were basically, told, I believe we had a couple of those things happen. But limitations, I think it's coming down to the people themselves. At the end of the day, some of them people don't want to come forward because they feel that they're going to be harassed by somebody or the other, or being asked, what were you doing there? Unfortunately, this has been the case with some people. So that's all I can say on that one.
Now, what about your thoughts about the complaints being forwarded to FICAC against the opposition parties? Complaints are just firing left, right, and center. Any thoughts on that?
That's what I was saying before, Shashi, that, all of this has taken the excitement out of having an election. There's so much paperwork. I'd never seen this kind of paperwork before. What can I say? What do you want me to say? Every party has to deal with it. Every party will have to find some way of working within the ambits of the law that's present, with the directives we get now surely when things change.
Every party, including the Fiji First Party?
Well, I'm sure they have to work within it, because if they can point out things, if they're not working within it, it restricts everybody. It restricts everybody. So that is why they were able to point out, okay, there's a mistake that's been made. Section 1123, I think it was. Yeah. So, it applies to everybody. And then you've got the right to go back and say, look, this is what's happened. And how it's going to be tackled is another question altogether.
Okay, having said that, then what is your assessment of the 2022 elections? Is there a change in the air? Can you sense the mood in the electorate?
um, yes. Yes. In 2014, we knew people had not actually that moved away. 2018, yeah, we had some, people still had moved away. This time around, in the last week alone, I've had so many people come up and just say, we need to change. We need a change. We need a change. And yes, I can actually sense that. And I think everybody around the place have been saying that. Everybody. After a while, Shashi, when something keeps pushing, there's going to be an opposite reaction to it.
Mhm.
So I think we've come to that place where we really, when something goes on too long, you need a change.
Is that the reason they give, that they've been in power for too long and we want to change? Or are
Well,
they
that's one of
referring
the
to
reasons. That's some
specific?
of, yeah. Well, there's quite a lot of people who've said that.
Mhm.
They've been in power so long. We need a change. I mean, look, that happened in Australia, didn't they? You had a really, really good government at one time, almost 12 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the
And
Howard government.
yeah, they did very well. And suddenly people just said, we need a change.
Hmm.
Despite, at that time they were doing well. But, in this case, we've seen so many things. And like I said, to be fair to, the government of the day, we've had COVID as well, so there's a lot of things that they've had to deal with. I think maybe later, I think we'll be talking about that. But anyway, yeah.
All right, now, how confident are you that the elections will be free, fair, and credible?
All I can say, Shashi, on that is there seems to be a change of wind and a change of tides. Let's see if the results of this election reflect that.
Okay,
That's all I
short
can
and
say.
simple.
Yeah.
Short and simple. Let me ask you about your party's leadership, Mr. Mahendra Pal Chaudhry. What are your views on his leadership?
Okay. There's a lot I can say, but I'll say it in the way that I have seen him work. Because to me, the value of a person is based on the way he or she conducts themselves. He is hardworking, he's consistent, he's reliable, he's steadfast in his commitment to the people of the nation, he can multitask, he understands finances and can see the way forward for our nation because he has a plan and vision. And he's seen this before. The other thing, he doesn't hesitate to pull us up for not working. I've been on the receiving end of that. He enjoys working with the young and always has time to answer us, commend us, or reprimand. And he refuses to spoon feed anybody.
Hmm.
And we must do our own share of work. And that to me means, he's disciplined and he's disciplining us in the process. And I tell you what, I'm sure he has many flaws. Then again, who doesn't? And I'd like to just add, I've had the privilege of working under his leadership since 2006. And even at the time when a lot of people had moved away, he was there. And I know that because I was part of the group that was there. So, this is a man, and it's taken me, I've given you quite a mouthful here because Shashi, he turns 80 this year. He turns 80 this year, and he's been in politics for a long time. So it's not that I'm saying it to, for any other reason, but I've seen these qualities. And for a man of 80 and that kind of commitment, like I said, in the weekend, he was out with one of our candidates. They attended at least about 5 to 6 meetings in that space of about 3 days. And,
Yes.
and then travel all the way back. If that's not dedication and commitment, I don't know what it is. So, yeah. No, he
Well,
probably, yeah. I probably will say, he might just say, why did you have to speak so long on me? There's other issues. Yeah.
no, well, at least I must add one thing, that Mr. Chaudhry has staying power. He has shown that over the years that he hasn't slipped a bit. If anything, he has just got better with age, and time will tell what happens in this election. The Labour
But,
Party slogan. Yeah,
sorry,
go on.
Shashi. I'd like to say, I wish we were able to give him his one full term, just the one full term, and see the difference. Many times you have the best coming in place and they're removed. And that's happened to him. That's happened to Labour Party under our first Prime Minister, Timothy
Dr.
Bovan.
Movandra.
Yeah, yeah. And, Labour's never been given that, to finish.
Yes.
Let us finish one term. And if you feel that we were never going to be any good, then that's a result. But if you can see the result within a year, just let us finish the term. And I'm not talking to the people, I'm talking to the people who constantly keep moving the benchmark, keep moving to change without outside the ambits of the law.
Mm-hmm.
Give us that chance, and that can only be done at the poll. We're not breaking any rule, we're
Yes.
working within it. So yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
All right. The Labour Party slogan, Labour putting people first. Tell me about that.
Well, like I said, Shashi, everything's about the ordinary people. And Labour was formed by trade unionists, or formed out of the trade union movement, more so. And that's our duty. That's all we do is we need to put them first because they are the biggest resource we have. Leave everything aside. You can't, that's what we're about. We're about people.
Okay. All right. As we head for the home stretch, Monica, let us look at the incumbent Fiji First Party. How would you rate them in terms of their achievements since the 2018 elections?
Okay. Look, like I said, to be fair, we had a good portion of it was we had the lockdown. They had that to deal with, and whichever party would have been in, or whichever government would have been in place, they've had to deal with it in their own way. So you have the plus and minus points. But since 2018, prior to that, and up to now, our debt level has continued to rise. Even though we put in a huge amount into the roads, that still is not finished, it's still not completed. We've been talking about in other forms of infrastructure like the water source and everything else. So what's working? So really, I think, at the end of I think what we really should be doing, Shashi, is, you have an assessment at the end of every, after every government comes and goes. We really should do an assessment to see how, it's usually done through, growth. It's usually done through growth. But yeah, I don't see much achievements at all. I don't see it,
Mm-hmm.
because we haven't moved. Lack of jobs, not enough jobs. Jobs are going outside. You've got people coming in from the outside, buying land, etc. There's so many things that have changed. Citizenships, for example, it's a bit of you can get that earlier. Before, it took 7 years before you could become a citizen of Fiji. But now it's different. There's so many things that are different. So, really, big question marks everywhere.
Okay.
Mm.
The Fiji First Party, do you think they're arrogant to the plight of the people? Is
That
there
is a
some
lead.
arrogance? Is there
That's
some
a leading
arrogance?
question. That's a leading question. But you know what? I think that's best left to the people to answer. And I think that can be answered at the polls.
Okay. All right. Well, many young people who will be voting for the very first time and who were too young to know what the last democratically elected government did in Fiji say that the Fiji First is the best and that they've done a lot for the people of Fiji. What would you
Mhm.
say to these first time voters?
Um, they're old enough. If they're old enough to vote, they're old enough to go back and see what history was like. It is important to know our past so that we know in which direction we're going to head. So the only thing I can say, go back into the past, see how things happened and how we've come here. excuse me, we've been independent since 1970. We've had 3 coups. We've had the removal of the monarch. We've been out of the Commonwealth. Fair enough. We got into a republic. We became a republic. That too. We also removed a government that was part of that. So they really need to know. They need to go back and they need to do their own research, so that it's not what they see, what they hear. It's what they have read, which is written, which should be correct. You can't tell somebody, expect them to believe something. They need to go back and they need to read. That would be my only advice. Go back and you read and find out for yourself.
Now, many have said through social media that Fiji, in reality, has a two-man rule, with some, in fact, claiming that in reality, the AG calls the shots and that the PM just follows. Do you have any opinion on who really is in control in the Fiji First Party?
Okay, you've said the Fiji First Party as opposed to government. So, as a political party, like in most parties, most times we have a spokesperson, which is a general secretary, and sometimes the president, he or she speaks. So, who really is in control? You might want to ask them. But as far as I know, as a general secretary of Fiji First Party, most of the statements has been given by the general secretary, which is the AG also. So.
Well,
To ask me who's in control, you'll really have to ask them.
no, no, no.
Because
I'm asking for your opinion. All right, forget the Fiji First Party, the
yeah.
government. Who is in control?
Well, look, they've got the majority of the seats, right? So obviously they're in control right now, and who's in control is probably the person who speaks out the most. And in this case, it would seem the AG seems to be the spokesperson.
All right. Let me ask you about your political aspirations. You were unable to complete your parliamentary term in 2006 because of the coup. What are your aims and aspirations as you gear up for the next elections?
Look, I think the basic aim is to make sure that we get into parliament. That's the basic aim. And how we go about doing that would be based on our campaign, based on us moving out there to be able to speak to people and see what they want, and to be able to convince them for the voting. So and like I said before, my goal is to see security in terms of food, water, and seed. I would very much like to see that, improved health system, improved education system. There's a lot of things that we need improvement with, and yeah, those are some of the aims.
All right. And Monica, what is your message to the people of Fiji?
I think it's quite simple. If you want to change and a caring government, make your vote count. I'd like to say vote Labour, but yeah.
That's it?
That's it.
That's your message?
That's it. Yeah. If you want to change and a caring government, make your vote count.
All right. And finally, Monica, what are your thoughts and closing remarks, if any, on the SST program that you've just participated in?
Well, before I say that, as a disclaimer, I need to add that any projects that I may have spoken about or talked about which requires funds, all projects will be government funded through the consolidated funds. And also, like I said, we have an alternative budget that's coming up with the Labour Party. Please check our website, Fiji Labour Party's website. We'll have our manifesto up there. We have a lot to offer. And yes, and Shashi, this has certainly been like a hot seat. Thank you for the platform and the opportunity that you and your station have provided for provisional candidates like me for the upcoming elections, 22, particularly for those of us, in Fiji. So it's really to say thank you.
Well, Monica, I owe you a big thank you as well for agreeing to take part. It's not a hot seat. People think it's a hot
People like
seat.
to feel with those kind of questions, you got to really begin to figure out how do we go about answering this.
You've done very well. Monica Raghwan, a very, very big thank you to you. Vinaka Vakalevu Dhanyavad. Thank you for being my chief guest in episode 40 of Sashi Singh's Talking Point. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you as chief guest, and I thank you for your very honest and frank views on a range of topics that we've discussed today. And I certainly hope our viewers have found your views interesting as well. Please convey my appreciation to your party leader, Mr. Mahendra Chaudhry, for putting forward your name to participate in this episode of SSTP. You've just been given a huge exposure via this platform, and we wish you the very best in the forthcoming elections. Monica, thank you again. God bless. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Shashi. Thank you.
Take care now. Well, that was our episode 40 today. To my viewers, before you leave, let me remind you that I will shortly announce our chief guest for next week. I thank you all for taking part today and for providing your positive feedback. SSTP, we ask the questions that Fijians all over the world want answers to. As I say, Fijians want to know. Well, that's it for episode 40. To my SSTP team, thank you for today's episode. I must thank you, our viewers, for watching this program. You are what makes this platform a huge success. Let me now reveal the name of our chief guest for the next episode. Ladies and gentlemen, my chief guest for next Sunday will be Mr. Honoré Chale, who is a Fijian politician and a member of Parliament of Fiji. He is a vice president of the Social Democratic Liberal Party, SODELPA. Honoré Chale worked as a diplomat and a civil servant, serving as permanent secretary for the Ministry of Labor, Fijian ambassador to the United States, and then chief executive officer of the Public Service Commission from May 2005 to 7th December 2006. I am really looking forward to an enlightening interview with Mr. Honoré Chale, who is also a provisional candidate for SODELPA. A lot to discuss with our chief guest next week. I hope you can join us for episode 41 of SSTP next Sunday. If you have any questions for our chief guest, Mr. Honoré Chale, please send them via the SSTP Messenger. I hope to see you next Sunday on Sashi Singh's Talking Point at 11 a.m. Sydney time, 12 noon in Fiji, 1 p.m. in New Zealand, and at 5 p.m. on Saturday afternoon in Los Angeles and San Francisco. Don't be late, or else you'll need a doctor's note. So until the next episode, I wish you all a very safe and happy week. In closing, I leave you with this quote from Abraham Lincoln, who said on the subject of freedom: "Any people, anywhere, being inclined and having the power, have the right to rise up and shake off the existing government and form a new one that suits them better. This is a most valuable, a most sacred right, a right which we hope and believe is to liberate the world." I'll repeat that quote from Abraham Lincoln. Any people anywhere, being inclined and having the power, have the right to rise up and shake off the existing government and form a new one that suits them better. This is a most valuable, a most sacred right, a right which we hope and believe is to liberate the world. That quote from Abraham Lincoln. Well, that's it for episode 40 of Sashi Singh's Talking Point. Next week, a brand new program, episode 41. Till the next program, I am Sashi Singh, bidding you all goodbye, namaste, and ni samode. Goodbye, world.